Hey, everybody. You made it all the way to the last talk. Thank you so much for sticking around. Thank you, Paul and Evolution guys, for having me over. Um, they've asked me to do one of my talks in like 15 minutes, which is the equivalent of like squishing a conspiracy theory video into a TikTok. So I'm going to try to do as much as I can in my talk. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Fawzi. I'm a game designer. I've been working in games for around 20 years now, a bit more. My career has taken me all over the world because of time constraints. I'm not going to tell you how this happened, but I ended up here. Yay! I'm in work at Ubisoft right now. I'm between Sweden and France. I worked on a lot of different types of video games. Like I worked on some very stereotypical farming games. Humble beginnings, because I'm from Jordan. I'm Middle East. That's where I'm from. Worked on some Flash games. So many games. Like worked some Persona games. I worked That's Me with a bunch of penguins. Worked on like some deep weeb shit in my time in Japan. Was worked with a lot of friends here at Dice on a lot of games that you guys are familiar with. And at Ubisoft, I also worked on Mario Rabbids and most recently Star Wars Outlaws, which just came out a few weeks ago. I love to make games. I love to talk about games, and I teach games pretty much everywhere I ever lived. Currently, I have a book coming out. It's called Demystifying Creativity on Originality in Game Development. This is coming out later this year, and a lot of what I'm talking about is about this. My friends say I'm a little bit obsessed with creativity. I hope it's in a good way, and it's something that I want to talk to you about today. So I guess the best way to start is to start off with something like a grand question, which is like, what is creativity really? Because a lot of people think that creativity is to make something, right? And I kind of disagree with this because, like, you and I can watch the same video about making crochet, and then we'll end up making the same scarf, And like when we're walking around with two identical scarves, we'll hardly be called creative, right? Or like you and I can buy the same Lego set, and then we'll follow the step-by-step instruction, and then we'll end up getting the same horse that's on the box, Like, and even though I made something, it wasn't exactly being creative. In fact, if the horse looked something like this, that might be a little bit more creative, right? And in fact, actually, that Lego set, you follow the step-by-step instructions, and it ended up being this instead of what's on the box. I think that's creative. Like you can build something like the Eiffel Tower in Las Vegas, and still people don't call you creative, because it's something that's been done before. Creativity is not to recreate, it's not to make something again. This is the Parthenon. You probably see it on top of the Acropolis. It's once stood a magnificent building on top of the mountain, filled with like a statue with lighting coming in from the top. Magnificent building. It's a bit of a shadow of its former self right now, but but it still stands the test of time as one of the miracles of architecture. There is an exact replica of the Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee. I don't know if any one of you know that, but also it comes full with like a statue and the lighting and everything. I doubt people would call that creative, because creativity is not uniqueness. Even though it's the only standing Parthenon right now, it's not really creative. Even if I would build a Tower of Babylon, and there's no other Tower of Babylon exists, once I'm done building that thing, people would not also call me creative, because it's been done before. Creativity is generating an idea that is unprecedented. It's an idea that every other idea that comes after it, it's the origin of inspiration for every idea that comes out of it. That's why the term originality comes from. It's the origin of every idea that comes after it. This painting is called Impression Sunrise by Monet. When Monet made this, and he wanted to join the Salon de Paris, like an art exhibit, and they said, no, do you call this art? What the fuck, man? Because basically this is what art standards were like. But that's not what Monet wanted to do, because at the same time as this was happening, the camera was invented. So working up your technique to build exactly what you're seeing wasn't exactly what they're interested in. And the Impressionists wanted to create what they're feeling. In fact, Cézanne wants to say that his job is to make visible how the world touches them. So what Monet and all of these Impressionists wanted to do is to basically capture that moment in time and how that moment in time affected them, and then make something out of it. So to some extent, originality very much is a personal experience. It's relying on how you are thinking and then translating that into something. One of the best people of doing this is this guy. Miyamoto is famous for diving deeper into his childhood and remembering experiences from his childhood and then creating something out of it. For he used to walk around like, in the city where he's from, and there's like the rain pipes at the sides of the building, and he used to peek into them, and he used to wonder what's on the other side. He used to wonder, like, if I could shrink myself and go inside of that pipe, maybe I'll come out at another world at the other side. And when you know that story, you come to understand how like the green pipes in Mario came to be. Came directly from Miyamoto, remembering this experience for him as a child and how that translates into a gameplay experience. This game is called Tomogarashi. So in high school, in schools in Japan, two kids will be rolling a ball, roughly a kid's size, and it's a heavy ball. Stuff gets stick to it, and they need to roll it from starting line to finish line. And then when they get to the finish line, the team that gets there win. Keita Takahashi played that game as a kid. I saw somebody kind of like, he saw it coming. I love that. So Keita Takahashi basically played that game as a kid. And this is how I ended up creating Katamari Damacy. So Katamari Damacy, for me, one of the most creative games of all time, starts off with this little character that is rolling this ball, and then stuff stick to it, and starts off with like, pencil sharpeners and erasers, and then ends up with cities, planets, and galaxies. One of the most creative games in our time came directly from Keita Takahashi, remembering an experience that he had as a child. So inspired by this, I approached my class and I asked them, can you guys come up with an idea from your childhood? And because there's stuff that we've all played as a kids, there were ideas that that I've seen pretty much in every class. So like there was always hide and seek, there was always the floor is lava, or there was happy sack racing. These are games that we all played as kids. But there was always this one student that had a little bit of a different story. She was in Jordan. She grew up in an apartment at the rooftop of a hospital. And she remembers when the school bus used to take her in the morning, she used to run through the wards of the hospital to take the school bus. She said, that might be an interesting setting for a video game. There was also this other student. This guy was in Sweden. And he studied in I forgot where exactly, in the countryside of Sweden. And his school was built on top of a graveyard. And him and his friends used to go out in the recess and go out on all kind of imaginary spooky adventures. He thought that might be an interesting setting for a video game. One of the two things I'd like you to take out of today is this. Originality, at its heart, is the odds game. What are the odds of somebody watching Die Hard, becoming a game developer, wanting to make a game about Die Hard? Probably quite common. But what are the odds of somebody growing up at the roof of a hospital to become a game developer, to want to make a game out of this? Probably not that high. Originality is an idea that is statistically unlikely. The more you can combine things that are statistically unlikely to come together, the more likely you are to arrive at originality. There was also this one student. She was in Japan. And she had an idea about being on a train. And a train, like commute, is a very common idea that I used to see in every class, no matter where in the world I taught it. But her idea was that she would try to look at as many people as possible without making eye contact. And then the minute she makes eye contact, they turn to flaming demons and attack her. So even an idea that is quite common, that we've seen before in a lot of classes, which is commute, when you add your own perspective to it, it kind of makes it unique. So our way of viewing things to the world can make even the most common things unique. Originality is your own twist on things. I'm going to be spoiling this movie. I'm very sorry. Licorice Pizza has been nominated to 5 Academy Awards. Beautiful movie. It's about a high school kid who dates a much older photographer who came to take the photos for yearbook day. And then they go out on all kinds of adventures in 70s LA, including starting a waterbed business and a pinball business. And I'm watching this movie, like, what the fuck is going on? What are these, all kinds of random events that are coming together in this movie? So I started to read a bit about it. Turns out Paul Thomas Anderson was going to pick up his kid from school on school yearbook day. And one of the kids in line was hitting on the photographer. And he thought to himself, this kid, he thinks he has a chance. I wonder what kind of relationship that would be. And he thought that would make an interesting setting for a movie. And the rest of the movie comes from his best friend, Gary Goitzman, who was a child movie star in the 70s, and you guessed it, started a waterbed business and a pinball business. So this movie nominated for Best Movie, Best Direction, Best Original Screenplay. It comes directly from Paul Thomas Anderson's personal twist on events that he knows. We can't create what we don't know, in fact. Everything we make has to come from something within us. Something in our life journey is the reason why we're making something. Uh, the guy that made the guy that made Squid Games was a huge fan of Takami's Battle Royale, which is like where all the Battle Royale games also come from. But he also remembers a part of his time in which he was going through deep financial problems and would have done anything for money. So he connected his love for like, you win this competition or you die kind of genre, and his financial struggles back in the day, and he combined them to make Netflix's most successful show ever. The other thing I would like you to take from this talk is called creative sobriety. This is a notion I am coining, and it comes directly from this exercise that I do. I would get on board and I would write the word color. And I would ask people to say the first thing that comes to mind when they hear the word color. You can't think, you gotta say the thing directly. So I get stuff like, red, white, black, purple, pink, etc. And then I will do the same for each one of those branches. So from white, I would get milk, shirt, wallpaper, etc. And then I will continue to do the same, right? So from milk, I get cow, from cow, I get horse, and from horse, I get unicorn. Highly creative people, who are people that generate original idea at a much higher cadence than others, when you say color, they think unicorn. For some reason, they skip several layers of association. In fact, it's connected with some kind of attention deficiency. So like mild ADHD, mild autism, daydreaming is actually a good thing. There is a direct correlation between attention deficiency and creative output, up until a certain point of impairment, because people with high schizophrenia, for example, show no sign of creative output. So it works for you up until a certain point. Some people are blessed with this, right? The first layer around color, I call inevitable ideas, because the level of connection is so simple that someone is inevitably going to think about it. So if your idea is purple, and purple doesn't exist yet, you better start making it. Because there's probably 5 other people that are working on it right now. Inevitable ideas are time to market ideas. They're bound to exist because the logic to connect them is so simple. Creative sobriety is for you to reflect on where you are. What are the connections that got you to this point? And what are the odds? You play the odds game. And when you realize where you are in your level of connections, you can intellectually push your idea deeper towards originality. You can work towards making this idea more original. I'll give you an anecdote of a friend of mine who is a game developer, and he was watching Squid Games. While he was watching the show, he was like, man, if I make a Squid game, I'll make millions. And he grabbed the laptop and he started working on a Squid Game, fired up Unity, he started making the game. But then as he's working on it, he was like, wait a minute, let me check first if someone else has made a Squid Game. So not only were there thousands of Squid Game games out there already, Apple banned people from submitting Squid Game games on the App Store at the time because there was thousands of them. The point is, what my friend did is that he thought about Squid Game. I like Squid Game. I want to make a game about Squid Game. He took an input and he made a thing about it. The connection is very likely. There's a lot of game developers that watch that show. But what my friend should have done with practicing creative sobriety is think about his life. What part of his life was touched by Squid Game, and why? And what is the game about that? Not the game about Squid Game itself. The part of his life that was influenced by it. So now a lot of you guys are thinking like, all right, Fawzi, we get it. Creativity is originality, ideas are unprecedented, blah, 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 but surely that's not all it. And I will tell you that in addition to originality, creativity is also value. So if I had an idea that is like, I want to make a solar-powered flashlight with no battery, that's an original idea, but it's useless if it's dark. Or if I give the idea of like, I want to make waterproof tea bags, that's an original idea, but within the context of usefulness, it has no value, right? But if the context is to challenge what tea bags even are artistically, then that idea has some value. So value comes from context. And context defines the value of the idea, no matter how original it is. There's a lot of game developers in the room. Back in the PlayStation 1, these are 2 driver games, the original and the remake. Back in the original PlayStation, it was a powerful machine, but it could only render so many polygons on screen, right? So what we needed to do, because we can only have so many polygons on screen, we need to have a space in which we load shit off and load shit in. And that's what we call the clipping distance. So on the horizon, we had to remove stuff so that we can add more stuff in. That's how we can maintain the number of polygons on screen. And then the more powerful the hardware is, the more shit we can put on screen. And then we can push that clipping distance further. right? So it's the balance, how much polygons you have on screen, how near or far your clipping distance, you know? So the guys at Silent Hill, they were like, we want to make a character, topical since the game is coming out, or came out. They wanted to create a very high poly model of the character. But what that meant is that they spent all of their budget on the character so that they needed to pull the clipping distance so close to the camera. And what that meant is that stuff started appearing suddenly, which looked really odd. So they were like, we know how we're going to solve this. We're going to cover all of this with fog. And the fog came to become a signature of what the IP is. Not only were they like, all the horror comes from the fog, all the scariness comes from the fog, it even represents the character's psyche. Like you started to spin it in all kinds of creative ways. But what they really wanted to do is that they wanted to hide shit coming in and out. So creativity comes from the context of constraints. When we define constraints, it allows us to be more creative. Some of you might know haikus, for example. Haikus has a very, very rigid structure. It's 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. And that's it. And people have been making poetry using this, and it goes across languages because of these restrictions for thousands, hundreds? Let's say hundreds to be safe, not dozens, of years. So when it's constraining, it allows people to be more creative. And when we impose constraints on ourselves is what we call that creative vision. Maybe you guys would recognize who made these scenes, right? A movie maker. Some of you might be saying Wes Anderson. Except like now this is the AI actually made this picture. This is a picture from the Tube in London. And this is a random bus stop in the south of UK. All of these images are from a place called accidentally Wes Anderson. so it's a subreddit. But what that means is that he created some creative vision that is so unique. His image is so unique and recognizable that even things that he didn't make start to feel like he did, like his use of symmetry, the use of pastel colors, and wanting the characters to face the camera. These are all restrictions that he put on himself. Nobody asked him to do this. Self-imposed constraints are called creative vision. Sam Mendes worked with cinematographer, what's his name? Dirk, I think Keegan is his name, when he was making the movie 1917. And his vision was that I want to make a movie that feels like it's one shot. And man, making a movie that is one shot is really difficult. Like it requires so many extras to all do coordinating moves with bombs and stuff happening all at the same time. It requires immense coordinations. Some of these shots are 20 minutes long. And what happens is if one person screws up, it'd be like, cut everybody back to their trenches and let's start all of this again, put bombs back in the ground. We need to start this scene again. But it's also what made this game magical, this movie magical, and what gave it all of this Academy Awards nominations. And the guys in Santa Monica, they had the exact same self-imposed constraints. They were like, what if we make a game with no cuts? That you can start directly from the cutscene straight into the action. And that one decision, like when you say, we want to make a game with no cuts, it triples effects that will show up all over the game because we need to load stuff out and load stuff in, This is why in that game there was very long elevator rides. They were like, you had to shimmy through very narrow ways because we can't afford you to go back and forth very quickly. That's why we also had a lot of long boat rides so that we can load shit out and load shit in. But at the same time, it created a very interesting gameplay experience that I've never seen before. And this is why this game is so well beloved. And it won so many Game of the Year awards when it first came out. Context is what you value. So like if I would ask you to make Mario jump, you would ask me, how high should Mario wiggle a little bit in the air before he falls down? Does he go down as fast as he went up? Can I move him around as he's on his way down? All of these decisions that you make, when you make anything as simple as Mario jumping, there is something in your life experience that led you to this moment. There is a reason why you thought, this height is good, or I like him when he shimmy a little bit like this. Somewhere in your life experiences led for you to make that decision. And creative sobriety is to look back into your life and understand why. Why am I imposing these constraints on myself, and can I articulate them? Because constraints are problems that we need to solve. And well-defined problems as a problem half solved. So what I'm trying to tell you is that you should embrace constraints. Constraints are good. And I would dare to say that you can't be creative without them. But also as creatives, your ability to identify why you like something and to articulate it to others is finding your creative voice. So to conclude of what we spoke about today, we can't create what we don't know. Everything we make will inevitably come from our life experience. Creativity is generating ideas that are both original and of value. And value is the appropriateness to context, as we said before. Originality is a statistically unlikely idea, it's the odds game. It's what led you to this moment. What are the odds of me having this idea? And value is the context in which we ideate. What is it artistically creating something, or is it the usefulness of tea bags? Self-imposed constraints are inevitable, and this is what we call creative vision. And when you practice creative sobriety and you reflect on your personal journey, it's the key of finding your creative voice. Thank you very much.